Hello and welcome to Terrain Made Easy. My name is Jane. In this video we're going to ask the question whether or not you should put bases on your terrain, and I wanted to make this video for two reasons. One, it's just been floating about in my head whether or not I want to put bases on my terrain, so we're going to talk about it. And two, we've had a lot of subscribers very recently to the channel and I just wanted to say thank you and wanted to do this kind of more talking video just so we can get to know each other a little bit better. And I'm going to presume that most of you will know what I'm talking about when I talk about bases on terrain, but I'll give you a quick example for just in case you don't. This would be an example of a piece of terrain. In this case it's a tree on a base, in this case it's an MDF circle, and this would be an example where the barricade has been designed in a way where it is not on a base. I have actually done another video on the materials you might want to use if you are using a base. I'll try and put that as a card up on this whichever corner it is. But yes, I'm going to break this down into two main categories, but there is actually a bit of overlap, and that's aesthetics and practicality. So I think the most obvious one is to talk about looks or aesthetics. Now this is a very simple concept here. If you like your terrain with a base on it, then you go ahead and design your terrain with a base on it. It's very simple. You pick whatever you want and you do that. If your gaming group all likes the look of terrain on bases, then feel free to go ahead. And conversely, if you think, actually, I prefer to have my terrain without a base for whatever reason, we're going to talk about some of those reasons, then in that sense, you're going to try and design your terrain so that you don't have a base on it. It's as simple as that. It's common sense that basically what you like might not be what I like, or what you like might not be what your friends like. Just do you. To move on to practicality here, there's a few different categories of this, but the first one I want to talk about is, can you physically put your terrain not on a base and have it work on the tabletop? Now, a lot of things like maybe a Games Workshop plastic kit or a 3D printed building or something, they're firm and solid and rigid, and you can build them and you don't necessarily need a base. But for example, something like this tree, yeah, it's a Woodland Scenics armature, and yes, it does come with a little base, but unless you are going to put that on a base, or like maybe attach it to a whole terrain piece in itself, that's like a possible different discussion, whether or not you want it to have it modular or fixed. But unless you're going to put that Woodland Scenics armature onto a base, you're really going to struggle to get that to stay up on the table. Any slight knock and it would just go flying. So in that sense, if you're going to do trees, they're sort of like, I was going to say infamous, but not like that many people actually care about it, but it's almost inevitable that you're going to need to attach it to something, whether it's like a round circular base or the whole piece of terrain. Another example where you might have to put it on a base is like little contact points. So I once built a building that had a little pipe connected to the building, and then the contact point was the floor. That very quickly and easily snapped off. Now there's ways where I possibly could have designed it without doing that, but if I really wanted to have that pipe there, then I would have had to have put it on a base, and quite frankly you might not have wanted to have done that. And there are actually ways to avoid that. One example of that would be, say, something like this barricade. So if I would have just done this barricade like a completely straight barricade, like one piece of foam board, you would have put it on the table and it would have gone, you know what I mean? Whereas because I did these like angled pieces, that gave it a wider like contact point to the floor, and obviously it's in my hand, so it's going to fall off because it's in my hand. But on the table that wouldn't fall over unless you like knocked it completely. So you can design pieces of terrain where you don't need the base. And there's another reason why you might not actually want to put your terrain on bases, and it sort of actually goes back to the aesthetics and the looks. If you don't have your terrain on a base, it now opens up what kind of biome or mat or game area you can put that on. I could put this on a snowboard, that's funny, or a grass board or a desert board or a mat or what have you, and you know what, it would look vaguely in place, and that's part of the design and why you would do it without a base if you want to do that. Now some people will go a little bit to the extremes of that. You might have it without a base, but you might want to make it like with snow on top. Now if you're going to put snow on top of your terrain, you're tying it into a biome, whereas one advantage to not putting it on a base is the fact that you are open to those biomes and not tying it in. Now I appreciate that that can be difficult. I think like Bad Magic Craft, he'll talk about how when he builds a tavern, why does he not cover it in moss and stuff like that, and he says, well, it's because I want to be able to use it in multiple conditions. I can put that on my snow terrain, or I can put that in my grass muddy field. Obviously if you put your trees on a base, well, I'm tied into the biome. This is going on a grass green board no matter what. I couldn't reasonably put this on a desert board, and I couldn't reasonably put this on a snow field, and I couldn't reasonably put this on just like a volcanic floor or anything like that. It simply wouldn't fit. Whereas say something like this you could do. Now going back to my building example where I talked about the pipe that was like this with a very small contact point, yes, I could have put that on a base, but I think the smarter option is to just remove the pipe and not use it, or put your pipe so it's got another contact against the building and you don't just have the one contact point. So there's ways to think about it and get around it so you can tailor your terrain to your taste, whether or not it's just because you want to have the freedom to put it on whatever biome, or you actually just think not having a base works better. It's sort of completely up to you. There's ways of getting around it. I personally think that in some instances having a base does look better, especially if you're going to take your terrain piece away from the mat or the board or what have you and have it as an independent piece for whatever reason. I personally find that having a base on the terrain just makes it look better. This looks weird on its own perhaps, whereas this looks like a tree no matter what. Now I do wish that in some other circumstances that I could avoid using the base. It sort of depends on my mood and how I'm feeling. It's completely subjective, as we talked about earlier. For trees, I would personally love to be able to have a tree that doesn't have a base. I don't know why, it just bugs me, but there's no real solution to it apart from maybe having like a fixed piece of terrain, and then I feel like you have a lot more problems. So whether or not you should put your terrain on bases, well, one, it's completely up to you in most circumstances, and if you just like one look over another look, then you work towards that the best you can. So if you like your terrain on bases, I'm pretty sure you could put most terrain on bases. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything where you couldn't. If you prefer it without the base, well, there are the classic practical limitations. You know, we are limited by the physical universe. If certain things are going to snap or get knocked over on the table, well, then you have to design around that. But if you do manage to design around that, you can also keep that in mind and design your terrain in a way where you can get multiple biomes out of it, multiple uses on different kinds of mats. That's always good, but you then have to make sure you're going to try and design your terrain with that in mind also. It's a tricky balance. I wish there was like an extra option that I could always not use my bases or always use bases. I would like a little bit more consistency. Now it's a little bit interesting for me because I do like having the multiple use where I can use my terrain on whatever, you know, mat or board that I like, but every time I see a piece of terrain that's not on a base, I think it probably would look better if it was on a base that matched the board. I just always think that. But then again, I really like the practicality of being able to move it around. So I'm like personally torn, and I want some sort of like hybrid that doesn't seem to exist. But, you know, as I said, we're limited by what is actually possible. And it's as simple as that. So let me know your thoughts on how you deal with this issue. Is it something you even consider? I know I probably spend way too much time thinking about whether or not my terrain's going to go on a base or not. Most of you probably just be like, yeah, I just do whatever I want. But yeah, the thing is, if you are going to base your terrain, you then have to worry about the materials, whether you're doing it MDF, PVC, etc. You know, there's quite a wide variety or range of basing materials, so you have that problem as well. So it can get more and more complicated. But yeah, it's really, I'm sometimes torn. I think like sometimes I'm like, that base looks great, or it'd be nice if I could use that on multiple boards. I guess that's inevitable. It's a dilemma I think we're all faced with. Is there anything specific that you've done to avoid this or mix it up? Have you ever gone to any extremes to not use a base? I would be very intrigued in your thoughts and your feedback. Let me know in the comments below. Other than that, I do hope you have a most beautiful day. If you like this video, press like. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you're interested in terrain, please do subscribe. It really would help. I do hope you have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.